The deal is done for Kris. What does it mean for the Jazz future point guard position? We're talking about it coming up on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Locked On Jazz for the 15th of March. Kris Dunn signs a multi-year deal with the Utah Jazz. What does it mean for Kris? A great story in a revitalization of a career story. And what does it mean for the Utah Jazz and their future and where their point guard goes? Since the trade, where do we sit? It's rather impressive, actually. We'll look at what a bunch of the Jazz players have done and the team as a whole. We actually kind of predicted it and what it means for the playoff run and where we are. Did you see the lack of rim shots in a game last night? The rim, the holy grail of defense, irrelevant in the playoffs. We'll talk about it. Plus, we'll do our lottery. Yesterday, the Jazz got the second pick of the draft. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. We're on YouTube. You can join the group, chat with the community, have a little fun, and do that as well. Please subscribe. 5-star reviews are always welcome. We did launch, it's day old, I love it, our new subtext group. What it is a private group, kind of, you think about some of my tweets going out to you that way. Some of my insight yesterday, we did a little thing on Walker Kessler and his road trip. Empty the Noggin is back. After games, I'll give you kind of a quick breakdown of what I think took place and my thoughts on the ball game for you. So it's exclusive premiere content that you can get. It is a 14-day free trial as I try to figure out if I can make it any good for you as well so that you can bail out if it sucks. And then it's $4.99 after that, so a month. So you're welcome to join it. The link is at the bottom of our YouTube, joinsubtext.com/lockedonjazz. That's joinsubtext.com/lockedonjazz. And for those who've already done it, kind of cool. Hope you're liking it. I've been super impressed by their platform, the people who run Subtext. That's why we did a big deal with Subtext and Locked On. So, and I'm part of the sample group. So glad to be doing it. We'll see if we can make it good for you, if it's going to suck. How's that? All right. Jazz signed Kris Dunn to a multi-year deal. Oh, by the way, I should point out, this is so fun. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NBA GM and managing your basketball franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. Download the game. Just visit ultimategm.com or look it up on the App Store. Listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON in the game. Our chat room, I'm sure I have to do an ad later for it. I'll talk about it later. It's hysterical. Like, our NBA host chat room is like everyone just boasting about Ultimate GM. It's like the Geeks game. It's like beautiful. All right. So the Jazz signed Kris Dunn. Multi-year deal, not all of it guaranteed. This is, I think, interesting. He really earned this, which is great. And, I think it was clear that we needed to sign him to the end of the season. So they agreed to a 2-year deal with next season being non-guaranteed. And this, this is interesting because Dunn's played well enough that he could have decided, like, you know what, I'll just hang out, be a free agent, and see where I can go. But I think he obviously feels comfortable here, likes it here, has been given a chance here, and so he takes the non-guarantee deal for next year. And then there's the next layer that I haven't seen anybody report yet, and frankly, I kind of unplugged when we finally got home yesterday, is what the trigger dates are. That often has a big deal. Like, is the trigger date just the beginning of the season? Is the trigger date sometime earlier? Do the Jazz have to commit? Here's what I think is so interesting about this, and I mentioned this the other day, is that the way Talen Horton-Tucker is playing made this actually more complicated. So we're short a point guard. That's probably the number one offseason need for the Jazz, is like a true point guard. Talen's done a really fabulous job, but I'm not sure that he's quite a starting point guard in the NBA yet. Like, he may become that. He's only 22 years old. Let's not close the door on it. Don't put a limit on him. But I'm not sure that's who he is. So the number one thing the Jazz have to do in the offseason is probably solve their point guard. They either might solve it through the draft, in which case then it's a real learning curve and an interesting year for the Jazz to deal with. And on a year in which your first pick is top 10 protected, maybe you're going to use that year to really develop a point guard as your primary thing, and that's a hard way to win in the NBA. And if your first round pick is protected 1 through 10, then maybe that's the right year to do it. Depends what you can find in the draft. Or you're going to go sign somebody to play point guard, or you're going to turn it over, to this group, Taylor Horton-Tucker and Kris Dunn. The likelihood is there's somebody else coming in, which then you could sign someone else and you draft like your 27th pick as a draft, and you're going to want to give that guy some time, or he becomes your third point guard. So trying to figure out where Kris Dunn's been terrific. He's done a lot of things really, really well, and he's making a nice step. And I had a wonderful conversation with him the other day I wanted to share with you. And what he's really done, frankly, is he's kind of figured out, I think, offensively where he can be effective. And he's that little floater. He is shooting at a level that I actually think is hard to sustain. I'm not sure he'll be able to hold it because, he's been up in the 65% range on that full floater, and feels like he hasn't missed one in about 5 games. That's, the league average on that is about 46, 47%. So when someone's at 65 on a small sample size, you'll generally say, okay, that's probably not really sustainable. But to Kris's credit, I think he's figured out that, okay, well, that's like, I'm not athletic enough as a point guard to be coming up and trying to finish over the top of the rim or getting all the way to the rim like I did in college. And his evolution is that, okay, I'm going to play the floater game and learn how to play the floater game. And he's done it really well. Last check, he's at 62%. So that could fade. The Jazz are at 47% as a team, which is right on league average. But I think, moreover, it's a confidence he's playing with for that. I was fortunate enough. So my point on the point guard situation is this got a little complicated in the sense of and it's nice I think the Jazz had no choice but to non-guarantee it, because you just don't know what our roster is going to look like next year. Taylor's playing well enough that you're probably feel pretty comfortable with Taylor being your second team point guard. Maybe you're going to thrust him up a tier higher than that. But I think he's shown, he's under contract for $11 million next year, that he can be the second tier point guard. He can probably be really good against second team guards with that size, that strength, and that confidence that he's building right now. So, while you're signing Kris Dunn, you're signing him to your third, except for the fact that you don't actually know what your roster is. You could be signing a free agent and drafting one with the 27th pick, and then you really want that guy to be your third. Or you're going to draft one early, and then Kris Dunn's really perfect because Taylor maybe is your second and Kris Dunn's your third. But if this kid struggles, then he can step in, and he probably also has pretty good guidance. And that leads to the other thing. I got really fortunate and got a chance to we crossed paths on the road this week and just sat and talked. And, I asked him if he's having fun. He said, finally again. And shared with me that for him, it was the G League, where playing with the guys who are making $40,000 a year, he got back to having fun. And that the transition from Providence to the NBA for him was hard. That, he didn't play great, but, in his mind, and certainly to say that was it, being the 5th pick and the pressure's on it and not playing great, I didn't react to it great. He was very, forthcoming about that. But what he also said is just you get to the league and everyone's, it sounds silly, but everyone's trying to pay rent. They're doing more, their rents are bigger than ours. But there's not the team camaraderie. That's not a natural thing in this league. It's not a natural thing in pro sports because everyone's trying to make a living and earn their time, and you're fighting for it and this and that. And even all the great stories with Ron Boone and the Winning Time documentary that came out where Magic comes in and Ron's you're not just taking my job. I actually want to play and have a living. And they, Ron, who's the best person ever, is gives Magic a hard time about it, is the story. And so Kris goes to Minnesota and he has a tough first year, and then the politics of it, he gets traded, and I think that kind of rips some of the fun out of it. You think you're established in Minnesota, you're a part of the group, and then you get traded to Chicago, and he goes to Chicago, and then frankly, I think these stories, I don't want to harp on these stories excessively, but it's pretty clear the Fred Hoiberg to Jim Boylan years of Chicago were not a pleasant place for any player to be and to play in. And, the politics of it all, I think really wore Kris out. And he said that just, frankly, it was the G League that brought back a joy to the game for him. And that then I thought this was super interesting. He talked about how he's failed. And, a lot of what's driving some of that kind of nastiness around everyone is also a little bit of a fear of failure, that I don't want to fail. Well, he's the 5th pick of the draft and he's failed. He's been to the G League. He's now bounced around, right? He played 4 games in Atlanta and 14 in Portland, and he played 9 games this year. Since the 1920 season, he's played a grand total of 27 NBA games. As a 5th pick of the draft, that unfortunately in our world goes down as a fail. And so he's hey, I've failed. I've been there, and I actually found out I was still okay. And so I think it's really an interesting story. It was a really enjoyable conversation to see him and how his game evolved and how it works, but really the person. So here's this kid who's the 5th pick of the draft, played 4 years at Providence, and gets caught up in just all sorts of NBA junk, right? Minnesota has never been a great franchise. Traded to Chicago, caught in the Hoiberg-Boylen years in Chicago, which were not good. It's just abundantly clear. And then, and I also think had the college experience of 4 years in that and trying to recreate it, didn't get it all. Got it when he went back to the G League. And those guys reminded him, this is supposed to be fun. We're battling, we're grinding, let's go after it. Let's do it together so we can all make it. Let's be in a collective environment. You would think the G League actually at times is even worse, but I think when it, misery loves company concept, that everyone's there together, opened up for him. So really neat to see, and I'm really happy for Kris that he's with us for the rest of the year, and then he has a non-guaranteed deal for next year, which gives him some stability. He knows where he's going to camp. And here's one thing that's important in this day and age for someone like Kris. He now has a training staff that he's working with all offseason. If he doesn't take the non-guarantee for next year, he's actually just a free agent without a team training staff to work with, without a team to work with until he signs and finds the new one, and probably not getting as much of a plan. Now the Jazz really are invested into making sure, and the Jazz staff's so terrific, that he gets better, has all these opportunities. So kind of a cool thing. But our point guard position for the future is still majorly in flux and probably the number one thing we're looking at. So I wouldn't say that even as well as Talon and Kris Dunn have played, that I would look at this right now and say we've got our point guard situation figured out. I would say probably that is still not the case. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by our friends over at Intercap Lending. This is a longtime Jazz sponsor. Intercap Lending came back, they've been around for a long time. Josh Romney purchased them and brought them back to Utah. And since they have just exploded, done a marvelous job. Why does a lending company explode? Well, because they get loans done, right? That's actually how it works. Realtors and people who need things done, they're not going to a lending company that doesn't get deals done. Also, amazing customer service, and that's where our guy Steve Carter kicks in. We have our own personal loan officer for you at Intercap Lending. His name is Steve Carter, and Steve takes care of you. You give him a direct call or you email me and I'll set you up with him. Email me at dlock09@gmail.com and we'll give you that. Steve's just amazing. He's simply the best customer service person around. And Intercap Lending, with their direct lender, with their ability to do different loans, with their ability to work on things uniquely and independently and holding their own loans most often, allows them to do a little bit more flexible things. So go check it out, 385-800-8528 if you want to call Steve directly. Just make sure you tell him you're Locked On Jazz so you can get the corporate discount, or just email me at dlock09@gmail.com so I can connect you. Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. For more information, visit intercaplending.com. I mentioned it earlier in the show. Locked On, I'm not sure that any of our Locked On hosts are actually getting anything done. I think they're just playing Ultimate GM. Ultimate GM is this super fun game. It's almost like if you're old enough as I am, you remember board games where you used to play them and you were basically the GM, or it's like if you played one of the EA sports games and you flipped it over to general manager mode. So your dream to becoming an NBA GM and managing your franchise, well, you manage every strategic aspect. Do you sign Kris Dunn or not? What is your point guard future? Hiring the right coach, trading players, making draft picks, navigating the franchise. It's super fun. A bunch of our guys won the championship. I think Hayes of the Bulls just won the championship. He was posting it up all over our group chat. So go check it out. Locked On Jazz listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when they use the promo code LOCKEDON in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, visit probasketballgm.com, scan the code, or look into the App Store. That's probasketball.com GM. The code is up on the screen. I'll leave it there for just another second. Thank you very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. For your second listen, may I suggest Locked On NBA Big Board. I'm going to reach out to Raphael and see if he wants to join the show tomorrow to do a little draft talk on a Thursday edition. Friday will be Ask LOJ. People in our subtext group will get their questions first, so feel free to join subtext.com/LockedOnJazz. If you'd like to, that's on the bottom of the screen as well. All right. I thought it was interesting I thought this was amazing. As we were playing Miami down to the wire the other night, if we had won that game, the Jazz would be like an amazing 7-7 since the trades. Which is interesting because we were like basically 500 before the trades. We're 6-8. What's interesting about the trades, and we actually, if you recall, I did a show right after the trades and said, hey, is there a chance like that we might be 500 after this? And my thought was that we traded 3 players that were not particularly strong defensively, and that we added players that were stronger defensively, because if they didn't play defense, they go home, right? Like that's my whole theory on a lot of these guys. Like they don't play hard, they go home. And that offensively, we would certainly drop, right? And that, and so what would, is there a chance though that we were, if you recall, and I'll be specific here in a second, before the trade, we were this like offensive juggernaut, bad defensive team. And so the question I brought up was, well, wait a sec, is there any chance that once we make this trade and we move guys that aren't particularly good defensively, and then but they are offensively, and so we lose that aspect of things, that we'll actually become better defensively, etc. So here's what's actually happened, and it's pretty interesting to me. I think it's a little bit of a tribute to Will. So we were 27-28. We made the trade. We're 6-8 since. We're 6-6 when Lowry plays, which is worth noting. So we were the 4th-ranked offensive team in the NBA. We're now 19th. We're 4 points per 100 percentage points worse without Mike Conley, without Malik Beasley, without Nickeil Alexander-Walker, without Jared Vanderbilt. That's not surprising. We've gone from the 10th best shooting team to the 20th best shooting team. We've gone from 25th in the league in turnovers to last in the league. We're turning the ball over 2 percentage more possessions more. So 2 more turnovers a game, basically, if we're playing about 100 possessions a game. That's a lot. That actually, we're down 4 points. We're down 4 points. And really what it comes down to is we're missing about 1 or 2 shots more than we used to make. Usually they're probably threes, or in the 3 range. And then we're turning it over 1 or 2 more times. We are offensive rebounding at a really, really high rate. And that's kind of covering up for some of these things. That's the plus going the other direction. And we're going to the line more. So we're missing probably 2 more shots. We're turning it over 2 more times. We're gaining an extra possession a night on the offensive glass. We're up to 33% of offensive rebounds misses since the trade. Pretty impressive. We were at 29. We were 6th. We're now 2nd in the NBA, but that's a big jump. That's 6 to 2nd's a big jump, bigger jump than say 11th to 6th. And then we're going to the line, the 9th most of any team in the league, 9th rate compared to 15th. So what you're seeing offensively is we're not as good. We're 4 points less good. And it largely comes down to we are not taking as many threes and we aren't making as many threes. And then we're turning the ball over. But we're covering that up by attacking the rim a little bit, getting to the rim, doing those kind of things. If we wanted to dig into it, just here's a little bit more. We'll look at shot frequency, the difference between the two in this time period. And I have to redo my filters, unfortunately, on this. So give me 1 second. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, which is, it's interesting. Again, this is a little bit where I would, I guess you, as a coach, you're not very good if you're so stubborn that you don't evolve with your team. And the Jazz team obviously evolved. And we went from Mike Conley, who does not go to the rim anymore at this stage of his career and is facilitating and trying to adapt, get people good looks, to Talen Horton-Tucker, Colin Sexton, who are attacking the rim at a pretty relentless rate all the time as your point guard. So, and then Kris Dunn's probably somewhere in the middle. So here's the shot distribution difference. We went from taking 30% of our shots at the rim, 25th in the league, to now taking 35% of our shots at the rim, 13th in the league. So that's a huge difference. Long twos, it's clear like that's not a part of our game. And even mid-range shots aren't. Long twos, we're at 5.6%. We were at 5.4. We were at 5.6. Like, it's clear Will doesn't believe in the long two, which is good. We're taking 30% of our shots as non-threes, non-rim, and we were taking 29%. So we've literally just moved our 3-point shots to the rim, which actually, interestingly, is a better shot distribution and location effective field goal percentage now than we had before. Even though we were shooting better and had better players shooting, and we were taking the 4th most amount of threes, we're now taking the 13th most amount of threes, and we're at the rim more, which is actually better. So to me, that's super interesting that here we are, and we've adapted And part of the thing we're doing is actually taking better shots with this team than we were. Now, on the defensive side of things, this is what's kind of interesting to me. We were not very good defensively with the other group. We were 27th in the league defensively, and we basically traded our three primary guys that played. None of them are particularly good defensive players, and maybe at times are overmatched. And so we went from 27th to 19th defensively. We went from 17th to defending the shot to 7th. That's really encouraging that we are 7th in the league defending the shots. We're not forcing any turnovers right now. We weren't particularly forcing turnovers before at 13.5% of possessions as turnovers in 22nd league, but now we're down to 10%. We're last in the league. So that, I think, as Will looks at the last 30 games of the year and says, okay, well, this is our roster. Walker's playing drop a lot more. We're protecting the rim. We're doing all sorts of neat stuff. We're going to have to find a way to force some turnovers. 10% is probably too low. I'm not the biggest believer in some of these things, and you can't be good at all four factors, but you try not to be like on an extreme anywhere. Our defensive rebounding numbers, which were not very good, 25th in the NBA, and I think defensive rebounding is becoming more and more important in the league, and I wrote a whole Twitter diatribe on this the other day, we were 25th in the league. We're now 21st, so that's nice. We've gotten a little bit better there. And then we're not fouling as much. The same part of not forcing turnovers also means we're not fouling as much. Those usually go together. Not always, but usually. And so we're 8th best team at not fouling. What it means is we went from like the extremes. We were the 4th best offensive team and 27th ranked defense to 19th and 19th. So we're the 19th ranked offense and the 19th ranked defense, and we're virtually 500. It's really interesting to me. I mean, our differential is not as good. We're -3 where we were +1. We've had one or two nights where we got run, and particularly that first night against Minnesota. So that, I think it's at least an interesting look at how we've evolved, how Will has adapted, how the players have adapted, and what we are as a team. At this point, I thought it was worth taking a look at. The defensive shooting frequency is worth taking a little bit of a look at as well. Let me make sure that all my filters are right as I bring these things up for you. And they were not. So that was super good that I checked that. I would have hated to give you wrong information. So if you look at what we're doing now with our defensive shooting frequency compared to what we were doing before, this is where, is Walker having starting? Is it a little bit of a better team? Are we having a better, impact on things defensively than we were beforehand is what you're looking at here. And I think we've changed with Jared. We were switching a lot. We are switching when Damian's on the floor right now. And we actually switched a little bit with Walker against Miami and played some really unique defenses. But here's where we are. We were allowing 13th in the league at 33.7% of the rim. We're now down to allowing 30% of the opponent's shots at the rim. So that's really great. That's the key. The holy grail is stopping the rim. So we've gone, we're allowing 3 percentage points less at the rim. We still force a ton of mid-range shots. We're 26th in the league, or 4th best, and we're 4th best again. And then what we are, though, has changed dramatically is that we are allowing above the break threes. We are not allowing any more corner threes. We're 4th in the league in allowing corner threes. We're now 3rd in the league in allowing corner threes. But we've just giving up instead of the rim, we're giving up above the break threes. That is generally where the league's heading. So we're moving in the right direction there defensively since the trade deadline in this roster. We have the 5th best defensive shot distribution. We had the 8th best before. So Will's been on this the whole time in the sense of having, and I'm a huge believer this is dictated by coaches, and this is a sign to me of whether coaches are doing the right thing, is when, like, we had a thing last year where all of a sudden our shot distribution defensively went wacky. We tried a bunch of things defensively and they didn't work in the middle of the year last year, and we suddenly were like one of the worst shot distribution teams. It's like, whoa, what's going on? But right now, I think that corner three, so you want to deny the rim, you want to deny corner threes. Right now, we're the 8th best team at denying the rim. We're the 3rd best team at denying corner threes. We were 13th and 4th, so you can see it being a coaching emphasis, but we've gotten better at it. So I think that's really cool. I just thought I'd look at those things. And then, the individual players during this stretch have also been interesting. We can look at that here in just a second. Plus, we have to do our I have a quick thing I want to point out from a game last night. Good friend Connor Varney let me know about it. And then I want to also do our fun little lottery that we're doing every night. So we got some fun stuff still coming up on the show. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On. It is time. Basketball, the month of March, all the greatness gets underway. You can become a new customer and get the no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bet back if your first bet doesn't win. Download the FanDuel Sports app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can do core market spread, over, under, totals, all sorts of things like that. You can also do player prop bets and create exclusive bets. It's super fun. And it's safe, easy, secure. It is the number one sports book in America. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance to a bigger payout with same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We do have our new group, the Subtext Group. You're welcome to join it. The link is at the bottom for you right there. It is joinsubtext.com/LockedOnJazz. It's a 14-day free trial, but it is $4.99 after that. It's one-on-one interactions with me, exclusive content. It's kind of our new venture we're running for premium people, for Locked On for premium fans. And I'm excited. Well, as CEO of the company and as Locked On Jazz, I sample these things. So, but I'm one day into it and think it's super cool. All right. Quick run through of what our players have done since the trade. Well, we actually could do that tomorrow. Well, tomorrow we're trying to do Rafael Barlow. So a few things on, Taylor's only played 5 games, Collins only played 5 games, or 2 and 3. Lowry's played 12 games, or 6 and 6. Walker's played 13, we're 6 and 7. So interesting to see that. Lowry is averaging 28 points, 46% from the field, 34% from 3, taking 9 threes and 7 free throws a game. It's so great, and he has the one disaster game in there in a small sample size. Taylor's averaging 15 points, 6 assists, 5 rebounds. Really great. He is also averaging 4 turnovers. And we're last in the league in that. So that's, let's give the whole picture. I think the most exciting thing for Taylor is on 3 threes a game, he's shooting 35% from 3. That's really the next step. Can he be an average NBA three-point shooter? And if he is, then his other skills all become awesome. So from an offensive standpoint, that I think is the coolest thing. The player that jumps out to me the most in what he's done is Kelly Olynyk. He's just an incredible Swiss Army knife of whatever you need. So he's playing 29 minutes. He's scoring 13 points. He's grabbing 7 rebounds. He's diming out 4 assists. He is turning it over 2.5 times. Let's do a little picture. And he's shooting 53% from the floor and 41% from 3, and he's actually taking 3.5 threes a game. Like, that's pretty amazing. Good for Kelly. Kris Dunn, 12 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 53% shooting, and again, 2 threes a game. He's never going to be high volume, but can he be better than the 28% he was in his career? He's at 37. Walker's at 12 and 12 in his last 13 games. Walker's numbers, really, you look back to when he started. And Ochai's interesting. Ochai's playing 27 minutes a night, and his numbers have slipped. Like, fine. So 41% from the floor and 33% from 3. And his numbers have really slipped, I think, because he's playing 27 minutes a night, and he's guarding primary guys, and he's being guarded by primary guys, and he's trying to do more in his game, and that's exactly what we want. Like, you do not want zeros out of Ochai right now. You want big numbers, 1 for 10, 2 for 11, 3 turnovers, 3 assists, 2 rebounds. You just want stuff. Because if you're making mistakes, you can fix those into something. If you become docile and you're not doing anything out there, that's really the problem. All right, I wanted to look at one thing with you from last night. There was not really many close game, late game watches, and I didn't do it. But there really weren't any last night. So there were no close game watches to watch last night. This is incredible. So one theory that I had from last year was that to make the playoffs, you have to deny the rim. Defensively, if you're going to make the playoffs, you have to deny the rim. But once you get to the playoffs, the good teams don't go to the rim anymore, so you have to change your defense. This was a little bit of Rudy's problem. Last night in the Milwaukee Bucks Phoenix Suns game, there were 9 shots taken at the rim in the entire game. 9 shots taken at the rim in the entire game. Phoenix took 3 shots at the rim. This is probably why Brook Lopez should win MVP, Defensive Player of the Year over Jaren Jackson. Phoenix went 2 for 3 at the rim, but also Milwaukee went 5 for 6. There were 109 non-restricted area 2s taken in this game. That's absurd. Phoenix took 73% of their shots as mid-range shots. They took 23 long 2s. It'd take us a week to take 23 long 2s. Now, to their credit, they made some of their long 2s Their short twos in the mid-range, they didn't. They shot 41%. They shot league average. They shot 45% on their mid-range shots. In fact, Milwaukee wins this game because Milwaukee had an unusually good shooting game in short mid-range. They went 21-33 for 64% and beat them. But just an interesting note on that kind of theory that I've always had about this, which is that, or not always, but I think this is the new stage. To get to the playoffs, you actually have to deny the rim, because over the course of the year, if you deny the rim, your defense will be good, your shot distribution's good, and a lot of teams you'll just go beat because that really hurts them. Here are the teams denying the rim in the NBA. Golden State at an incredible rate, 25% of shots by opponents are 5 percentage points more than anyone else. Like, a story that's not being told in the league is, what is Golden State doing in rim defense? Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, then Houston's in there. Give credit to Steven Silas for that. Washington, Orlando, Lakers, Clippers, Pelicans were 13th. It's interesting. But of the bottom teams, I don't think any of the bottom, other than Cleveland, which is surprising they allow so many rim shots, of the bottom 10 teams in the NBA, there's a real chance none of them make the playoffs. So you have to deny the rim to make the playoffs, but then once you get into the playoffs, none of those teams need to go to the rim anymore. All right, is it time for lottery? I wonder if I could find a way to just share this every day. I don't think so. I don't think I have it set up for display window capture. Let's see what happens if I do this. Nope. Oh, but I can do that. Here we go. At home, I know how to do this. At the road, it's not as easy. For those of you on YouTube, you're going to get the real simulation. We're using Tankathon. We do this together every day. Here we go. It takes away some of the drama if you can see it happen, because when I read it out. But for the audio listeners, here we go. The number 1 pick of the NBA draft goes to the Detroit Pistons. Number 2, Dame Lillard in Portland. Do they go Scoot Henderson? Do they go Brandon Miller? Rising talk of Brandon Miller as the 2nd pick of the draft, which is interesting, and frankly, what Rafael Barlow of Locked On NBA Big Board, the main host, talked about 3 months ago, and he got throttled for it, but he might be right. Scoot Henderson's been shut down for the year, by the way. 3rd pick of the draft, the San Antonio Spurs. 4th, the Dallas Mavericks. That'd be pretty good for the Mavericks. They missed the playoffs, and they then go get the 4th pick of the draft to go with Luka. Houston, it's probably one of the kids, maybe one of the kids out of Arkansas. Houston 5, Charlotte 6, Orlando 7, 8, Indiana. Chicago has to give up the 9th pick to Orlando, so Orlando goes 7 and 9. Washington 10, New Orleans 11. Utah would be 12th under this scenario. Toronto 13, the Lakers at 14, and not in the playoffs, so then they do not give up their pick to New Orleans? I thought they would still. Oh, it's maybe in that mid-level is where it's not protected. Interesting. So the Utah Jazz would end up with the 12th pick, the 17th pick, and the 28th pick. Denver's loss last night slipped them behind Philadelphia for the record, so Philadelphia moved to 28th in the league, 3rd best record in the NBA. 3 best records in the NBA right now are all Eastern Conference teams, because Denver's struggling. All right, that is Locked On Jazz for the day. No lottery luck for us today. Thanks so very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen. I'd suggest Locked On NBA Big Board as your second listen. If you'd like to, come do the 14-day free trial on our subtext at join subtext.com/LockedOnJazz. Appreciate you very much. Thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful day. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.